They told you to be a good person, and you believed them. You said the right things. You did the right things. You were polite when you wanted to scream. You were generous when your soul was starving. You apologized for things that weren't your fault. You smiled in rooms that were killing you. You thought goodness was the path to love, to safety, to peace. But something doesn't add up, does it? Because beneath the surface of your goodness, there's a quiet sickness growing, a heaviness behind your eyes that no one sees, a pressure in your chest that no amount of kindness can soothe, a sharp, invisible rage that you swallow with every forced, "it's fine." And now you're exhausted, but not from doing too much. You're exhausted from abandoning yourself in the name of being good. This is the lie. This is the mask. This is the prison that Machiavelli tried to warn you about, not with tenderness, but with fire. With the brutal clarity of a man who saw through the costume and wasn't afraid to say it out loud, that goodness, when performed instead of chosen, becomes weakness. And weakness invites exploitation. Because the world doesn't care how good you are, it cares how useful you are. It rewards compliance, it celebrates your silence. It bows to the mask and crucifies the truth. You were never taught that. You were taught that goodness is virtue. But no one told you the cost. No one told you that being good in a broken system makes you complicit in your own erasure. That being polite to people who weaponize your kindness doesn't make you moral, it makes you prey. And now you're beginning to see it. You see it in the people who only call when they need something. You see it in the relationships where your love was expected, but never returned. You see it in the job where you gave your best years and got a plaque, a handshake, and an empty ache in your chest. You see it in the way people respect your absence more than your presence. And worst of all, you see it in the mirror, in the hollowness behind your smile, in the rage behind your patience, in the collapse behind your "I'm fine." You became good, and in doing so you became invisible. That's what they don't tell you. That goodness, when not grounded in strength, becomes self-erasure. That being agreeable doesn't make you whole, it makes you digestible, and the more digestible you are, the less anyone ever stops to ask, "Is this who you really are?" They don't ask because they don't want to know. They need you to be consistent, to be easy, to be predictable. Because predictable people are easier to control, and control not truth is the game the world plays behind the curtain. This is the Machiavellian lens you were never handed, not to become a monster, but to stop pretending monsters don't exist. Machiavelli saw the world not as it should be, but as it was. He saw that kindness without strategy is suicide. That morality without power is decoration. That compassion, when unguarded, becomes a currency others spend for their own gain. And yet, you kept giving. You kept forgiving. You kept softening, because you thought goodness was its own reward. But all it rewarded you with was silence. Internal silence. The kind of silence that echoes loudest when the room is empty and you realize you've been good your whole life and no one ever truly saw you. Because they weren't looking. They were feeding. Off your loyalty. Off your guilt. Off your inability to say no. And you called it love. You called it character. You called it strength. But now you're cracking. Now you're angry, and not just at them, at yourself. For staying quiet, for being obedient, for smiling through betrayal, for calling it grace when it was actually fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being judged. Fear of being not nice. But what if nice is just another word for obedient? What if politeness is just performance? What if being liked has nothing to do with being whole? You have to ask yourself now, before the mask becomes permanent, what is the difference between being good and being real? Because they're not the same. Goodness, as you were taught, is about sacrifice, about self-denial, about being palatable, agreeable, non-threatening. But realness is dangerous. Realness doesn't say yes when the body says no. Realness doesn't apologize for truth. Realness doesn't trade its voice for acceptance. And realness is what you buried when you chose to be good. But it's still there, isn't it? The fire, the no you never said, the anger that keeps rising like a tide in your throat, the part of you that doesn't want to be liked, it wants to be free. That's the part Machiavelli was speaking to, not the manipulator, not the tyrant, but the one beneath the mask. The one who sees that goodness without power isn't virtue, it's surrender. And surrender without awareness becomes servitude. You don't want to serve anymore. Not like this, not at the cost of yourself, not with a smile that hides a scream. So what now? You can't go back. You can't unsee the mask. You can't pretend your kindness hasn't been used against you. And you can't keep trading authenticity for acceptance, not if you want peace, real peace. Not the peace of avoidance, not the quiet of repression, but the peace of standing in your full truth and letting the chips fall. Because that's what power is, not domination, not cruelty, not manipulation. Power is presence. Power is saying no without flinching. Power is walking away from what shrinks you without explaining. Power is reclaiming the parts of you that were labeled too much and wearing them like armor. You've been taught to fear your own strength, taught that power corrupts. But what they didn't tell you is that lack of power destroys. It destroys your boundaries. It destroys your clarity. It destroys your capacity to love without resentment. And now you're here in the ashes of your own goodness, asking the only question that matters. Can I still be a good person without being weak? And the answer is yes. But only if you burn the version of goodness they handed you. Only if you build your virtue on sovereignty, not sacrifice. Only if your kindness comes from clarity, not fear. Because real goodness, holy goodness, doesn't betray itself to be liked. It doesn't contort to be tolerated. It doesn't flinch in the presence of power. It meets power with its own. And that is what makes it indestructible. That is what makes it sacred. That is what makes it real. But realness has a price. You can feel it already. The tremble in your hands when you tell the truth without softening it. The look in their eyes when you finally say no. The silence that follows when you choose not to explain yourself. When you don't bend, don't perform. Don't entertain the expectations that once defined you. You thought liberation would feel like flight. But right now it feels like exile. Because the moment you stop playing the role, the stage disappears. And with it, the audience. You start to see who is clapping for you. And who is clapping for the mask. And that silence, that sudden absence of applause, it's not failure. It's freedom echoing. And freedom, true freedom, begins when you realize you'd rather stand alone in your truth than be surrounded in your performance. But that choice, that is the crucifixion of the good person you were trained to be. Because goodness, as you were taught, is social currency. Withdraw it and the world will start to charge you for it. They'll call you cold. They'll call you arrogant. They'll say you've changed because to them, obedience looked like kindness. And now that you're no longer so easy to shape, they can't tell the difference between your self-respect and rebellion. They say you've hardened. They don't see that you've awakened. You've stopped bleeding for people who never intended to stop cutting. You've stopped performing humility for people who only heard you when you whispered. You've stopped mistaking their comfort for your purpose. And now you're dangerous, not because you're cruel, but because you're finally clear. You see the game. You see the contracts. Unspoken but binding the invisible agreements you signed to keep their love. If I stay quiet, you'll stay close. If I shrink myself, you'll feel big enough to love me. If I carry your pain, maybe I'll matter to you. But now you see it every kindness that came with a leash. Every compliment that cost a piece of your truth. Every time you were good. When what you needed was to be honest. And honesty doesn't always look like virtue. Sometimes it looks like rage. Sometimes it sounds like I'm done. Sometimes it's silence in a room where you used to perform. And yes, it terrifies you, because the mask protected you from rejection, from judgment, from the loneliness that comes when you refuse to trade authenticity for belonging. But the deeper loneliness, the one that eats at you in the middle of a crowd, comes not from being alone, but from being unknown. And if you have to be unknown, let it be for who you are, not who you pretended to be. Because the lie of the good person isn't just social, it's spiritual. It trains you to worship self-erasure, to call your abandonment of self a moral high ground, to make virtue out of your silence, your compliance, your quiet death. But Machiavelli saw what others refused to name, that the world isn't fair, that cruelty doesn't care how gentle you are, that systems don't respect your patience, that people addicted to power won't suddenly wake up because of your kindness. He didn't write to corrupt, he wrote to confront, to tear away the illusion that if you're good enough, pure enough, selfless enough, the world will eventually reward you. It won't. It will devour you. And then call you bitter when you bleed. But bitterness isn't the wound, it's the wake-up. The moment your body says no more smiling through betrayal, no more self-help in a burning house, No more fixing what you didn't break just to keep the peace. Because peace without truth isn't peace, it's prison. And you weren't born to live behind glass. You weren't born to serve narratives that shrink you into a footnote. You were born to be fully, unbearably, inconveniently alive. And aliveness, real aliveness, means you will upset people. It means you will be misunderstood. It means you will walk away from tables where your truth isn't welcome. And yes, it will cost you. But ask yourself, hasn't pretending cost more? How many years have you given to people who never asked who you really are? How many words have you swallowed to keep someone else from feeling uncomfortable? How many times have you been good just to be allowed to stay? And stay where? In rooms that didn't see you? In relationships that loved the idea of you? In a life where you're always editing yourself for the comfort of others? What you thought was safety was dependence. What you thought was loyalty was fear. And now that the truth is rising, you can feel the fracture, the part of you still trying to be liked, and the part of you that's finally ready to be free. Let the fracture break you, because real strength is forged in the fire of disloyalty to the lie. And the lie is this, that you must be good to be worthy. No, you must be whole. And wholeness includes the parts they told you to hide. The anger, the clarity, the refusal, the deep visceral knowing that goodness without boundaries is not compassion, it's self-harm. You don't need to become cruel. You need to become true. True to your no. True to your needs. True to the voice that's been whispering, maybe screaming beneath the mask. This isn't who I am. This isn't what I want. This isn't enough. And when you finally answer that voice, not with another performance, but with presence, you won't need to be good anymore. You'll be whole. And that is what they fear most. A person who no longer plays their part, who doesn't need applause to feel valuable, who doesn't need permission to be real, who doesn't fear the silence that comes when the audience leaves because they were never the point. This is the death of the good person, the birth of the sovereign one, the one who looks in the mirror and doesn't see shame, but power. The one who knows that sometimes, to save yourself, you have to become the villain in someone else's story. Let them write what they need to. You have a new script now, and it doesn't require your betrayal, not anymore. You've done that dance. You know the steps by heart, the quiet nods, the practiced smiles, the 1,000 small amputations of your own voice. Each time you dimmed your light so someone else wouldn't feel small. Each time you softened your truth so someone else could sleep at night. Each time you swallowed the scream in your throat because you didn't want to be difficult. You were never difficult. You were dangerous. Not because you wanted power, but because you remembered it. Somewhere in the marrow of your being, even as you bowed, even as you bent, even as you broke, something inside you never agreed to die. It just waited. Waited for the moment when the exhaustion became louder than the guilt, when the mask became heavier than the silence, when the script could no longer hold the weight of your truth. And now, you're here. At the edge of everything they taught you to be, and the cost is clear. You can't be who you truly are, and still be who they need you to be, because who they need you to be is convenient, predictable, containable. But you were never born to be a container. You were born to be the storm, and storms don't apologize. They don't wait for permission. They arrive, they destroy, they cleanse, they leave behind truth, not the kind that comforts, the kind that cracks the earth open. And that's what you've become now, a fault line between who you were and who you are. 1 foot in the lie, 1 foot in the fire. But the fire is hungry, and the longer you stand still, the more it will consume you from the inside, because truth doesn't wait. It doesn't whisper forever. At some point it roars, and you are no longer afraid of the roar. What you're afraid of now is the silence that follows it, the relationships that dissolve when you stop performing, the family dinners that go quiet when you speak honestly, the friends who fall away when you stop filtering, the love that dries up when you stop pretending to be less. But let them fall. Let it burn. This is the funeral, the one you were always going to attend, the death of your goodness, as defined by obedience, and the birth of your sovereignty, as defined by presence. Machiavelli didn't warn you to harden your heart. He warned you to see clearly. He warned you not to confuse your virtue with safety, because safety isn't granted, it's built, and you can't build it on sand, on people who only love your silence, on jobs that only value your productivity, on systems that reward your absence. You build it inside, brick by brick. No, boundary, departure. You learn that your yes means nothing if your no isn't respected. You learn that your kindness means nothing if your anger is demonized. You learn that love means nothing if it only lives on the condition of your smallness. And you stop negotiating, not because you hate them, but because you finally love you. And you will protect that love now, fiercely. Even if it cost you the illusion of connection, because connection built on betrayal isn't connection, it's performance. And you are done performing. You are done explaining. You are done contorting your nervous system into palatable shapes so no one feels the depth of your presence. Your presence is your power, and it makes people nervous good. Let them tremble. You've trembled long enough. You've made yourself digestible long enough. You've cut yourself down to fit the narrative, the role, the mold, long enough. And what did it give you? A seat at tables where you couldn't speak. A home in rooms that never held you. A name that was never your own. But now the name is returning. It's written in your scars. It's etched in the parts of you they said were too much. The fire in your voice. The certainty in your gut. The boundaries in your spine. These are not flaws. These are your reclamation. And the moment you stop apologizing for them, the moment you stop needing to be seen as good, is the moment you begin to live as true. But don't mistake this for ease. The world punishes what it cannot control. And an untamed sovereign soul is the most dangerous thing of all, not because it harms, but because it reveals. It reveals the lie of the script, the emptiness of the roles, the futility of performing for crumbs of connection. You are not here to beg for worthiness. You are not here to be polite in your suffering. You are not here to bleed beautifully for the comfort of others. You are here to burn, and in that burning, to become. So let them talk. Let them say you've changed. Let them call it selfish, arrogant, even cruel. They are not speaking to you. They are speaking to the ghost they lost. The version of you that agreed to the unspoken contract. If I'm small, you will stay. You broke the contract. Now they have to face themselves. That's not your burden. Your only job now is to remain. In your truth. In your fire. In your unapologetic no. You will not play the role again. You will not wear the golden chain and call it love. You will not confuse their discomfort for your mistake. This is not a mistake. This is emergence. This is your untaming. This is your name echoing through the bones of the old life, calling you home. So keep walking, even if it's alone. Especially then. Because if your authenticity cost you connection, it was never connection. And if your freedom cost you approval, it was never love. Let the lie collapse. Let the story end. You have outgrown your disguise. And your real life begins now, not in the applause, not in their eyes, but in the quiet, searing truth that you are no longer theirs. You are yours. And for the first time in your life, you can feel what that actually means. Not as a concept, not as a self-help mantra, as a visceral, full-body truth. You don't need to ask anyone for permission to exist anymore. You don't need to soften your edges to be worthy of love. You don't need to prove anything to be real. Because realness doesn't need proof. It simply is. It walks into a room and changes the temperature. It doesn't apologize for taking up space. It doesn't shrink when it's misunderstood. It doesn't perform empathy to be liked. It doesn't sacrifice itself to be seen. It just breathes. And now, so do you. Fully. Finally. Without the tension. Without the guilt. Without the mask that you once believed was your face. The silence that used to haunt you now feels like sanctuary. The solitude that used to crush you now feels like clarity. Because you are not empty. You are here, present, undivided, awake. And in this aliveness there is no longer a need to be good, only a need to be whole. You understand now. They never loved your goodness. They loved your compliance. And now that the compliance is gone, the real ones will stay. The real ones will meet you in the fire, not try to put it out. The real ones will hear your no and still feel safe. The real ones will not flinch when your voice shakes the room, because real recognizes real. And now that you've shed the mask, you will see who's been wearing one all along. Don't fear what you lose in this shedding. Fear what you were becoming to keep it. You were becoming smaller, safer, quieter, invisible. But you were never born to disappear. You were born to disturb the waters, to be the mirror no one wants to look into, to be the storm that reveals what's been rotting underneath all along. You were born to embody truth, not to whisper it. And yes, it is lonely, and yes, it is costly, but the cost of betrayal is greater. The cost of living someone else's idea of goodness is your life. And you've paid enough, so now you walk. Not with revenge in your heart, but with clarity. Not to punish the world, but to reclaim your place in it. Not to be seen, but to see. And what you see now is everything you once gave your power away to was hollow. The approval, the applause, the image, none of it fed you. It fed the mask. But you are not hungry anymore. You are full of self, of knowing, of fire. You don't need to be the savior anymore. You don't need to be the healer, the helper, the good one, the understanding one, the endlessly forgiving one. You don't need to carry the weight of being digestible to people who never once asked if you were okay. You get to say no, without explanation. You get to walk away, without drama. You get to choose yourself, without guilt. Because the truth, the deepest truth is this: you were never weak. You were taught to believe that power was a threat. You were trained to wear virtue like a muzzle. You were conditioned to flinch at your own intensity. But intensity isn't violence. Truth isn't cruelty. Power isn't corruption. Only unintegrated fear makes them so. And you are not afraid anymore. You have walked through the fire of your own forgetting, and now, standing in the ashes, you remember. You remember the version of you that never agreed to shrink, the one who screamed no in 1,000 quiet ways, the one who made you ache every time you betrayed yourself. That version of you, the one who held the line when you couldn't, that is your strength. That is your soul. That is your compass now. So let the world say what it wants. Let them call you selfish. Let them misunderstand you. Let them write their own stories about your silence, your boundaries, your refusal to bleed on cue. You are no longer available for anyone's comfort at the cost of your integrity. You are no longer dressing your truth in apologies. You are no longer delaying your freedom for the illusion of peace. Because the peace that cost you yourself is not peace. It is a slow death. And you are not here to die quietly. You are here to live, fully, radically, unapologetically. You are here to embody the kind of truth that shakes people awake even if they hate you for it. You are here to walk into rooms not asking, do they like me? But do I belong here? And if the answer is no, you leave. Not with resentment, with reverence. Because every step you take now is a return to what was never gone, only buried. A return to the wildness you called wrong. A return to the clarity you once feared. A return to the self that doesn't perform, doesn't plead, doesn't apologize. And in that return you are no longer just alive. You are free. No script, no mask, no chains. Only you. The storm. The mirror. The name they can't pronounce anymore. Because you are not who you were. You are who you were before they taught you to be good. And now you are whole.